here in the heart of Benbridge. It's great to see you and welcome to this evening with Justin Welby. My name is Steve Daughtry and I'm the vicar here.
And my name is Claire King and I'm the curate here.
And this,
and my name is
the Most Reverend Right Honourable Justin Portal Welby, by divine providence, Lord Archbishop of Canterbury, Primate of all England and Metropolitan. Your friends in Ghana call you Nana Kofi, Canterbury 1. Well, we'll just call you Justin. Is that all right?
No.
My Lord Bishop, I will carry on with your grace. Your grace. Yes. Justin, did you have any nicknames at school?
No.
Okay.
This is going to be a quick interview.
He's got 2 minutes for questions. So far, we've only taken 3 seconds. Can we welcome Justin to our church, please? So, before we begin, if there is indeed earthquake, fire, or flood, the good news is that we have an archbishop and a bishop to intercede for us. The bad news is if God doesn't hear their prayers, you've only got me, in which case we're toast. In the event of fire, would you please follow the instructions of the fire marshals? Would the fire marshals please stand now? These are the people in charge when or if there is fire. And you please leave through this fire exit here, this fire exit here, or the fire exit through the door behind me. Tonight is an opportunity to meet Justin the man and his faith. We've stepped aside from shaking hands with good and great, and we've laid aside all the pomp and the circumstance that goes, Justin, with your position. And I would just like to talk to you about your life and your faith and the challenges and the hope of the church. I want tonight to be fun, to be real, to be honest, to be relevant. I'm a dad of 5 children, and my deepest concern as they were growing up was to say to them, church is a community of people that speak like you, talk like you, look like you, have the same challenges and issues that you have, and have something relevant to say. And I think there is a church that is real and passionate and relevant to the 21st century.
The format of the evening will be some questions from me and then some questions from Steve, including all of those that have been submitted by the congregation. Interspersed with some of the questions, there will be 6 hymns or songs that Justin has chosen himself, and each time we have those songs, we're going to ask him why he chose them. And then finally, we aim to finish at around 8:30.
So Justin, you've asked not to see any of the questions that we're going to ask you. So we'd like to begin with some quick fire questions where we're just going to ask you to choose between 2 things. You're not allowed to think about it. You must give your most instinctive answer.
You have 1 minute to answer 22 questions. Are you ready? Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Books or movies?
Books.
Beach vacation or mountain retreat?
Oh, beach vacation.
Summer or winter?
Summer.
Star Wars or Star Trek?
Both.
Camping with Bear Grylls or glamping with Bishop Jonathan?
Bear Grylls.
Morning person or night owl?
Both.
Chocolate or vanilla ice cream?
Chocolate sprinkles on vanilla ice cream.
He's a classic Anglican with his compromise.
Beatles or Beethoven?
Beethoven.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Rugby or football?
Rugby.
Gardening or cooking?
Cooking.
Training shoes or Jesus sandals?
Oh, training shoes.
Dancing or singing?
Oh, golly, no. Can't sing, got no rhythm.
Okay.
Superpower, invisibility or time travel?
Time travel.
You want to see Jesus, don't you? Spaghetti or pizza?
Forbidden both.
Scuba diving or skydiving?
Skydiving.
Art museum or science museum?
Art museum.
Hot tub or swimming pool?
Swimming pool.
Board game or movie night?
Movie night.
Jesus, would you come again now, or Jesus, would you mind putting it off?
Come again now.
We also have some questions I'm going to ask you from the primary school children. So, do you like meeting people, and how does it encourage you and your faith?
No, I really hate meeting people. And, no, do I like? I love meeting people, but I do we have a phrase in the family which is peopled out. And occasionally, I will say, or Caroline will say, where people die. And it doesn't happen very often, but peopled out means I just can't face having to meet anyone else for the moment. I need some space and silence and prayer.
It's a good job you're not head of the Church of England then.
Yeah. But on the whole, I love meeting people. As it encouraged my faith because it's astonishing the depth and nature of the questions you get asked. So someone on the bus in London will say, my sister's husband is dying and he's in his 30s. Why is God letting that happen? And you're on the number 11 bus and you know, there isn't much, and everyone is immediately listening. And you have to find a way of speaking to them about the hope that there is in Jesus.
Second question from the children. Would you advise all children to travel and see the world?
No, not all. No, I wouldn't actually. I think I'd advise them to be themselves. Yes, travel is really good for you, and I love travelling. But some people, it's just stress the whole time. And I think, so there's going to be quite a bit, if you don't like quite a lot of God stuff, then please go.
You come to the wrong place.
Yeah, you really come to the wrong place. And the pub's down the road. But I think one of the things that is so amazing, as I've discovered over the years about God, is that we are not treated, it's not a sausage machine process. Every single person is valued in their own way by God. So our daughter with learning difficulties is as precious to God as her brother, who's in a few years going to start a PhD in patristic theology and is doing a curacy in London at the moment. And they're both equally valuable. And God meets each of them in the right way for them. And I think that is just, it's why the Lord's Prayer starts in Aramaic with Abba, Father. It's a remark of intimacy. When Jesus teaches his disciples to pray, he teaches them using words of the most intimate relationship. We don't treat all our children the same. Who does?
Thank you.
Okay, so Justin, the first song that you have chosen for tonight is I Cannot Tell by He Whom Angels Worship. Would you tell us why you chose this hymn?
It's because it holds together two extraordinary things. It puts a bunch of questions to God, essentially. I cannot tell why He whom angels worship should do X, Y, and Z. And that's where most of us are. If I'm being asked, for instance, questions about suffering in an interview or TV or radio, I'll say quite often, I don't know. The world's really messed up. But I've often actually used the words, but this I know, that Christ died on the cross, for my sins, and yours, if you don't mind me being so rude as to assume you've got some. You know, when I was doing a talk in Bristol Cathedral in the first year after I was Archbishop, and I was doing a sermon, and I made a remark like that and said, but of course we're all sinners, I'm a sinner, you're a sinner. Someone came up to me afterwards and said, if I'd known you were a sinner, I wouldn't have bothered to come. So let's get that out of the way, and again, the pub's just down the road. But this I know is, when Jesus comes, we see who God is. At the beginning of John's Gospel, in the sort of prologue of the first chapter, nobody has ever seen God, says John to his readers. But he, Jesus, has made him known.
I'm going to keep you moving along. Folks, let's stand and let's sing. Justin, families are often broken and messy things, meaning they're made up of people like you and me. Your childhood, idyllic or challenging?
Challenging is one of those euphemisms, isn't it?
It is. I thought I'd be euphemistic. Tell us about it.
Very complicated, very difficult. Well, it was complicated for a lot of reasons, some of which I only discovered a few years ago. But my mother, who died in July at the age of 93, was an alcoholic. And well concealed alcoholic at the time I was born. And she eloped with my father in April 1955. I was born in January 56, by which time the marriage had collapsed. Although they, for reasons of the law at the time, they didn't divorce till 1959. My father was also an alcoholic. And so it was generally a childhood of litigation over who had custody, of extreme complications of shouts and violence and all kinds of things.
Were you caught in the middle of that, or did you escape it?
No, I was caught in the middle, except when I stayed with my grandmother in North Norfolk.
Were you like a football, or were they using you?
Not deliberately, I don't think. I suspect they felt they were trying to do the right thing, as parents in the middle of divorces often do.
Okay. How did this affect you, your psyche and your sense of confidence?
Well, at the time, not a lot. I was apparently quiet, but I was an only child. Only children tend to be quiet. And I went away to boarding school when I was 8 and a half, 8 3/4, something like that, 8, 9. And how did it affect me? I think I just sort of took it for granted that that was what life is like, and there's no point in making a fuss about it. So I don't think it particularly affected me until much later. It's always left me with, there's always a slight sense, but most of us have that imposter syndrome or something like that. But, yeah.
Okay, so you went off to boarding school. Happy years, unhappy years?
Better than the alternative.
Explain.
Boarding school was 1960s, mid-60s, 1964 I went.
Single-sex boarding school?
Okay. Was there any other? No heating, open windows, 2 blankets, very thin, dormitories, bullying, the normal stuff that you've got at school, caning, the normal stuff. Most people here would have known something like that.
Were you academic? Were you sporty? Were you neither of those things? Musical?
Thick as 2 short planks, apparently. Never did any work. Couldn't kick a football to save my life, and had no sense of rhythm or tune. But apart from that, Yeah, I was really talented.
So the wonders and miracles of God that you're here in this position. It's
when they read out, when we consecrate a bishop, I always get a letter back from the monarch, the king now, which starts.
We are very surprised.
No, it says, Justin Welby, by divine providence, Lord Archbishop of Canterbury, the bishops are by divine permission, but the archbishops are by divine providence. And it always makes me think providence is absolutely incomprehensible.
Justin, your second hymn is And Can It Be? Why would you choose this one?
Well, when I was 19 at Cambridge, in my beginning of my second year, 2 days ago was the anniversary, October the 12th, 1975. I gave my life.
I want to get to this bit in a minute.
Well, you just asked them.
Don't you give me that chat. This is my church.
I've got a vacancy in the Falkland. As they say on the Today programme, if you've anything. And I won't go into details of that, but I put my life in the hands of Christ, and there was an enormous change in what I understood about God. And the following Sunday I went to church, which was a new idea, and the hymn was And Can It Be?
Okay.
And what was so, the preacher was someone called David Watson. And what was so amazing, I discovered later, is that it's the hymn that Charles Wesley wrote on Pentecost Sunday in 17-something or other, on the day after his conversion. And so it expresses to me the wonder that the God of all creation should know about.
That's okay. Have you always believed in God?
Sort of. I was never an atheist, and I always sort of liked the idea of there being, well, liked or thought there might well be a God. But that was, if there was a God, I had no idea what that meant in practice or anything like that.
So, if I expand on that, do you think that you believed in him but you didn't have a relationship with him, or do you think you always did have a relationship with him?
No, I think I believe that he probably existed, but it didn't have anything to do with me, and I didn't have a relationship with him, and I wouldn't have understood that kind of language anyway. How could you have a relationship with someone you couldn't see?
Right. So, okay then, so what were your key milestones for coming to faith? What happened that took you from, okay, there's a God who's up there, but I don't know him and I don't have a relationship with him, to when you actually became a Christian?
When I left school, I went and worked in Kenya in 1974 in a school in the foothills of Mount Kenya, and it was on the site of a former internment camp for Mama, the group that depends which side you're on, but they were a group that was seeking independence for Kenya, nationalistic group. They attacked a number of farms and that kind of thing, and many were interned, many were killed, many were interned, and the headmaster of the school I was teaching at had been interned on that site before, after independence, it was turned into a school. And there, lo and behold, was this Brit coming along to teach this 18-year-old. And in him, in that headmaster, and in so many of the people there, I saw something that I hadn't seen before, which was about knowing that you're known by God and knowing you're loved by God. I came back, so that was the first milestone. Second milestone was in my second year at university. First year I ran away as hard as I could. Second year, I was asked out to a talk in a church called Holy Trinity, Cambridge, and by an evangelist to tell me about who Jesus was. And all I remember was being really bored. It may have been a very good talk, but I was a very bad person. And I didn't think much of that. And a few days before, there'd been something entirely different. There'd been a group of Ugandan bishops that had come to England, 3 of them, and it was during the time of Idi Amin. And they'd been doing they'd been going around preaching. One was called Festo Kivendri, long since died. And he was an amazing, extraordinary man of great transparency and honesty. And I was very struck by them. And after supper, or after this boring evening on the Sunday, the person who asked me said, let's go and have something to eat. So we went and had something to eat. And we started talking, and by the end of the evening, I felt everything he said made some sense, but not a lot. So the next stage was he said, so what do you want to do now? I said, well, we better pray. And I prayed, God, I don't know if you exist. If you do, I want you to be in charge of my life. And so you don't have to have a very learned prayer, because that really didn't count very much on that scale. And it was very clear that something happened. That I met with God and life changed.
It's amazing. I'm just interested because I just want you to see if you can tell us what you actually think makes somebody a Christian. So are we born Christian because our national heritage in this country is Christian? Are we Christians because our parents are Christians? Do we become Christians the minute we're christened or baptised? What does make somebody a Christian?
Billy Graham, who was a famous evangelist until about 15, 20 years ago, from the 50s, 1950s, said, you're no more a Christian because you're born in a Christian country than you'd be a hamburger if you were born in McDonald's. So that was that. And you don't inherit it either. Our kids, we have 5 children, 4 of them are following Christ, and one says, I do God, Dad, but not church. There are days when I don't entirely disagree. But I can't really say that. So it goes down back. So I think I don't want to go. What makes a Christian? You find it in the first chapter of John's Gospel, where it's because we realise that living our life under our own control is, well, apart from us, it's pretty daft, because not many of us are any good at it, and none of us are. But secondly, the one who created us knows what's best for us and loves us infinitely, and we see that in Jesus. And it makes sense once you've looked at who Jesus was and at the resurrection and what happened to his disciples, it makes sense to take that seriously. If God has taken the trouble to become human and live among us, is that really something that we should say, oh, well, that's okay, but I don't really care? I mean, it's true, it's everything, and if it's not true, pay no attention, forget about it, walk away. But don't just think, oh, well, what's that matter? So that's, I think, what what happened is one way or another, and with some people it's gradual, and with some people it's sudden, as it was with me. We need to know that our lives are turned around from being centred on us and are centred on Jesus Christ, who is alive and who gives us his Holy Spirit to go on.
Thank you so much. I 100% agree.
That's reassuring. Otherwise, I might just ask Jonathan why you ordained him.
We're going to have our third song in just a second. It's called Faithful One. Could you tell us why you chose that?
Justin, I told ChatGPT that I was interviewing you today, and I put in a few details of your life, and I asked if you could ask the Archbishop of Canterbury one challenging question, what would you ask? And it came up with this. As a Christian, do you believe God shields us from the brokenness of this world?
You're kidding me.
No?
Oh, I've never been questioned by a computer.
I thought we'd have all sorts of questions today.
That's amazing.
As a Christian, do you believe that God shields us from the brokenness of this world?
No. And I really, in fact, quite the opposite. And there are lots of reasons for that. But I think the one that really matters beyond anything else is not what our experience is, but what God's experience is. Because Jesus came to a rotten place in a rotten time and lived a really hard life and was crucified unjustly, young even for those days. And in other words, and he says to his disciples several times, disciples aren't greater than their master. If they do this to me, they'll do it to you. And my experience around the Anglican Communion, secondly, is of seeing Christians in all kinds of appalling situations, and yet holding on to the presence of Jesus, presence of Christ. And thirdly, there is a deep sense that if we were just, if God was just a divine insurance policy against a troubled life, that doesn't give us any choice, does it, about whether we follow him. We follow God because he loves us and calls us to follow him. And he says, take up your cross. Well, that immediately tells you it's not going to be easy.
You've experienced two huge tragedies, at least in your life. How has your faith helped you?
It's not my faith that's helped me. It's God, wherever my faith was. You see, we don't hold on to God. God holds on to us. And that's such an important difference. Looking round here, there are one or two people of round about my age. There may even be people who are older. And so I'm going to talk about grandchildren rather than children. We all know with small children that they grip your hand and they think they're holding on to you. But who's holding on to who? It's not my faith. It's God's faithfulness that makes the difference. And as I've said, that comes in all kinds of extraordinary and different and sometimes very puzzling ways. And it's helped me. How has God helped? Because in the end, the thing I know is my identity, who I am and what I'm for, is not found in circumstances or in DNA or in anything like that. It's found in the fact that Jesus Christ knows who I am.
Thank you. Challenging personal times, let me change tack for a second. Given that under 2% of our country attend an Anglican church, and that number is shrinking year on year, do you think the church has failed or is failing in its mission?
Yes, to be honest. I think it's one of the areas I really struggle with, because I was always part of growing churches and seeing churches grow, and I sort of accepted that that was what churches did, and they certainly did, do all around the world. And I think, have we failed, or are we failing? In one sense, that's above my pay grade, but what I know is that we have not lived and served and loved clear, including loving those we disagree with, or even really find virtually impossible, and particularly over the last 500 years, which is quite a long time, we haven't lived in a way that says to the world, we're marching to a different tune.
Okay, thank you. Justin, what is the church's role, if any, in the situation, the terror, the atrocities that are currently facing Israel and Palestine?
I read something recently. I was asking myself the question, what's the church's role in a time of war, which they're obviously in? And I've seen in Ukraine when I was there last December, and I've seen in many places in Africa. And there was a bishop at Chichester called George Bell, who wrote about that in 1939, the end of 1939. And his answer was very simple. He said, the church's role in a time of war or other great disturbance is to be the church faithfully. So when I rang up on Sunday, our Archbishop in Jerusalem, who's a good friend, Hossam Naum, do pray for him. He's an amazing man. In our conversation, he's Palestinian, he's an Israeli citizen, but of Palestinian background. In our conversation, his only expression was of horror and grief for the Jewish people who had been slaughtered. And he exhibited, because he hasn't always had an easy time. He lives in East Jerusalem. And he exhibited what the church should be, which it's a very weak church. It's a very fragile, small church, less than 10% of the population nowadays. But he showed a church that kept its eyes on Jesus. He showed himself as someone who kept his eyes on Jesus and was determined not to hate. And that's just the church being the church. So the first thing I think we do is we learn afresh in this country and around the world to love one another.
Justin, do you see a hopeful path through to a lasting sense of justice and peace?
In the Holy Land?
Yeah.
In human terms, no. I've spent many years working on issues of reconciliation there, with absolutely no progress of any worthwhile nature. And I haven't seen any other progress. And in the last 6 years, things have got tougher and tougher and harder, and the distances and the bitterness is deeper and deeper. I'm not saying whose fault that is, that's just a reality. But what I know, I was talking to someone on about Thursday from South Africa, Thursday night, and we were talking about their experience when de Klerk let Mandela out of prison. And he said, we all expected civil war. We were sure there would be civil war. And then there was a miracle. And the miracle was lived out by de Klerk, by Mandela, by Archbishop Desmond Tutu and many others. But there was a miracle, there was a change of heart. And I look at the Holy Land, and in human terms, the situation is impossible. But as the Gospels say, nothing is impossible with God, and the God who raised Jesus Christ from the dead will bring justice, mercy, and peace to that land as to everywhere else at some point.
Thank you. Justin, you've talked about your personal life and the tough challenges there, the challenges that are tough in the church, the challenges that are tough, the church talking to and with the world and holding its hand. You've chosen Blessed Be Your Name as the next song. Why did you choose that?
Chris is signalling that is Matt Redman. Matt Redman is one of the finest modern writers of contemporary worship songs. And he draws on a huge range of sources, but two of the more important sources are his own and his wife's life and experience, and the Psalms. They have a huge impact on him. The more you listen to his music, the more you hear the echoes of the Psalms. It's very interesting. And he and Beth, his wife, went through a really awful time of losing a child. And they were quite open about it. And this was written out of that experience by both of them. I think I've got that right. Yeah, I have. And I've got to know Matt a little. And he is just the most humble and gracious and lovely man of great courage, and who doesn't hide struggle, but trusts the God who holds on to him. And this is where that song comes from.
Thank you. We're going to stand and sing this song, followed straight away by another song called Oceans. Please stand.
Save the best for the last. Do you think society in the UK is getting more or less socially, spiritually, mentally healthy? There's a question.
Well, everyone expects me to say less, but I don't believe that. I think it depends where you look. Golden Age syndrome is a really dangerous disease, because actually a lot of us tune out the bits that weren't good. I travel a huge amount. I go to all kinds of really terrible places where there are lots of people and full churches. But what's his name? Not Empire, whatever it was. Long Book. No, not Tolstoy. Dominion. Tom Holland. Thank you. I can never remember anything. Tom Holland wrote this book, Dominion, which is fascinating because he traces a lot of what we consider to be our national secular values back to the 1,000, 1,500, 1,400 years of Christianity that lie behind it. Why do we think that it really matters that we educate children? Because certainly from the Reformation onwards, the church got involved in educating children so children could learn what it was to be Christian. And once they knew how to read and write, it opened up universes to them. Why do we believe that, unlike the Romans, it's a good thing, I don't mean the Roman Catholics, I mean the ancient Romans, it's a good thing to look after children even if they're really ill, and not cast the sick on a rubbish heap to die? Why do we think that caring for the poor matters? Why do we think that a just society matters rather than power? I won't do the whole argument because we'd be here all night, but all of it comes back in many ways to who Jesus Christ is, to what is revealed of God in the Bible, and through that into our culture. So when Beveridge produced his report in 1942 about the post-war society, Beveridge was a close friend of William Temple, the Archbishop of Canterbury, at the time from 42 to 44, and Archbishop of York before that. He died in 44. And their other friend was a very well-known philosopher, social philosopher. And the three of them used to sit round what's now our dining room table in Canterbury and cast a vision for what a really just and good society looked like. Now, the interesting thing, they were all practicing Christians. And it was out of that it came. So, is society always worse? No. Are there things that are much worse? Yes. An awful lot. Our incapacity to deal with difference with each other, which has always been there, but is certainly not getting better, in many ways getting worse. Our selfishness, our reliance on material things for eternal comfort, forgetting that they will fade completely and give up. Our thought that our leaders can be without fault. Our incapacity to forgive those who show they're sinners. I could go on forever. But those are really bad. So I say there's lots of things. I'd much prefer to live in the UK in the 21st century. I love this country. I think it's an amazing country. I'd much prefer to live here in the 21st century than in the 19th, when there were 75,000 child prostitutes in London, under the control of pimps, who were pimping them out to the rich. It's not really a good society, that.
So,
and things like that.
So, 21st century, we've got all kinds of other things.
In one sentence, everybody here has been given a little leaflet that says a little bit about our church and mentions something called the Alpha Course. Can you just tell us what your opinion is of that?
The Alpha Course is, for those who've been Christians for a long time, is like a sort of 20,000 mile service where you can ask all the questions you've picked up and get honest answers from other people in your group and from the talks, semicolon. The Alpha Course for those who are not Christians...
I only gave him one sentence, that's why I said
I've read Gibbon. He can do 3 pages on a thing. The Alpha Course for those who have not come, who would not consider themselves Christians, is a place in which you can, no question is wrong, no question is out of order, provided it's polite, but it can be very challenging. No question, there's conflict between all those, no question is stupid, and you can ask anything you like, colon.
They're all going to hang you out there if you keep going. It's fine.
Thirdly, the Alpha Course is an amazing opportunity of honesty and fun and friends and just being able to be yourself and not have to pretend in any way at all. Full stop.
So, Justin, you've come to us, our little village here on the edge of the Isle of Wight, not as Archbishop in all your finery and pomp, but just as a normal broken bloke who's experienced life.
Speak for yourself. Sorry. Yes, quite. Sorry, forgot me lines.
Life as many of us have. You've been incredibly honest, very brave, taking any question that would come. We are most grateful that you've shared your life, your testimony, your story with us this evening. Would you give them a round of applause? I don't believe for a second that an Archbishop's blessing and prayer is worth any